Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to CCAD's President's Lecture Series, a conversation featuring Amy and David Butler. We're so excited to have you here tonight. I'm Melanie Corn. I'm the president here at Columbus College of Art and Design, and we are thrilled to host tonight's discussion with Amy and David Butler, both, of course, who are acclaimed artists and designers, and both of whom are alumni of CCAD. I want to begin by thanking all of our staff and students who helped make tonight happen, as well as our public event sponsor, the Skestos Endowed Fund for visiting artists and lecturers. Tonight is just one event in CCAD's ongoing Visiting Artists and Scholars series, featuring innovative artists, designers, and thinkers, in addition to the community lecture or conversation, which of course are always free and open to the public. During their visits to campus, these artists and designers and scholars teach workshops and seminars or engage in one-on-one mentoring and studio visits with graduate and undergraduate students here at CCAD. It's one of the many opportunities afforded to our students to prepare them for their future careers and to support the college's mission to foster a diverse community, a diverse campus that educates students so they can unleash their creative power to shape culture and commerce. Today, Amy met with Suzanne Cotton's senior fashion design collections class, and David did crits with junior graphic designers. And I'd like to thank them for taking the extra time today to meet with our students. Hopefully, you all got here early enough to enjoy the reception and check out the exhibitions in Butler Gallery. I Was Here, an exhibition of work by emerging and underrepresented lens-based artists that is part of Photo Focus Biennial, and Tracing Echoes, featuring works by Julie Abjanik and Kelly Malikosak, two of our faculty here. Julie is also an alum, and this work was inspired by their New York City residency last year. First, of course, I want to thank Julie and Kelly for sharing their opening with us so we could do two things at once and serve this event as well as their reception. And whether or not you checked out the exhibition earlier today, please come back. We have a rotating group of exhibitions in Butler, and Butler is open Wednesday through Saturday, 11 to 6. Admission is always free and open to the public. Finally, I would be remiss if I didn't also remind you to all mark your calendars now for Saturday, December 7th. It is our annual CCAD Art Fair and Marketplace, where our students and alumni, over 100 of them every year, are selling their art and design and craft work. It's, of course, perfect time for not only self-centered buying, but gift buying as well. And so please come back to that. You can always learn more about all of CCAD's events on our calendar by visiting ccad.edu/events. And now, let's turn our attention to this evening. Amy Butler graduated from CCAD with a degree in fashion design in 1988. Her early success came as a fabric designer, but a true creative. Even at the height of her international fame, Amy wasn't satisfied to just sit back and keep doing what she knew worked. Instead, she pivoted to create a large universe of Amy Butler design, a multimedia enterprise that now includes Blossom Magazine, multiple books, global retreats and workshops, and Caravan Souk, an online and pop-up shop featuring artisanal and one-of-a-kind home goods, textiles, and more, inspired by her global travels. But before any of that, Amy met David at CCAD. David Butler graduated in 1987 with a degree in graphic design. He has had a decades-long successful career in branding, advertising, and retail design, working for major corporations like American Eagle and Nike, and local companies like Harvest Pizzeria and Three Tigers Brewing. He's also done album covers and artwork for Rolling Stone, but he's not just a designer. David is a musician, a member of the indie rock band Black Owls, Go Owls, and an artist and with multiple recent solo exhibitions around Ohio. Perhaps most importantly, or at least most interestingly to me, Amy and David are a creative team. Not just a married couple who both happen to be designers and artists, but true collaborators, sometimes co-creating, sometimes supporting each other's independent projects, and I can't wait to ask them how they make it look so easy and gorgeous at the same time. So now please join me in welcoming our esteemed guests, CCAD alumni Amy and David Butler, to the stage.
Is this on?
This is always the first test.
Did I screw it up? Is it on?
I think I'm official.
Yay!
Is Amy on? Am I on? I'm not on.
Is Amy on? No. Is Amy's on.
You were.
I was? Okay. Am I on now?
No. Ooh, I'm on now.
Okay, so I'm not on now. Okay. How about here? Yes. Okay. Thank you. It takes a team to get my mic on.
So thank you for joining us here tonight. And again, I truly thank you for spending the day with us. It's been really wonderful to have guests in who really don't want to just come here and, sit in front of an audience and say a few words, but really engage with our students. So I genuinely appreciate that, and I know our students do as well.
Oh, thank you. It was an incredible day. It meant a lot to me.
Good. Really glad. So let's just start off. To start, can you both share a little bit of sort of what's behind the bios? And really, let's start way back. And how did you get to CCAD?
Oh, I wasn't supposed to be here. That's probably the story a lot of people have. I knew I wanted to come to art school. I knew that this is the place I needed to be, but my dad had other ideas for me. And God bless him, he wanted me to major in communications at a liberal arts school and minor in art somehow. And I applied at a couple universities, but I applied late. I did all my testing super late, and I didn't do it on purpose, but I think the universe was looking out for me. And my mom took me to a few different art schools, and we came to CCAD. I said, I really want to come to CCAD. And I applied and shared my portfolio, and I got a scholarship. And I told my dad, sorry, Dad, it's the only place that would take me. So that's how I got here.
Yeah, it was either going to be this or working at Wendy's for the rest of my life, and I was cool with that, but it just didn't seem like it was going to really be me following my passion. And my family was like, this is a ridiculous idea. But this was it. I mean, one of my best friends growing up, Sean Wolf, was 2 years ahead of me here, so I was brought into the fold of CCD early, like by just coming here to visit and kind of getting a feel for the school anyway before I actually started coming here. So it was just going to be the most natural, organic fit for me, so my family had to just basically roll with it. I was like, whatever scholarships I need, this is where I'm going to go, because I didn't want to go, I really didn't want to go anywhere else. So that was it. That was my focus from high school.
And tell us both where you're from.
I'm from North Dayton, West Milton, Ohio area. Pretty much grew up there. Started in South Dayton and ended up in North Dayton.
And I grew up I went to Mount Vernon High School.
Great.
Yep.
Great. So though you often collaborate, and we'll come back to that in a minute, you also have really different aesthetics in many ways when you look across your work. Can you each talk about what influenced your style?
Yes, definitely my upbringing. Because my grandmother was an artist, my mom was an artist. So our household was always very creative. Something was always being made. And we were also a thrifty family culture. And Mom and Grandma would take me to garage sales all the time, and flea markets and antique shows and auctions. And so our homes were completely put together with all these beautiful finds. And I remember my grandmother's decorative dish collection. And I would just go to her place and just fantasize about those dishes. They were just so beautiful. And when I go to anybody else's home, I always felt out of place. I'm like, well, where's all your cool stuff? Like, I don't understand this. So that's, having an appreciation for old things and beautiful design, and especially decorative things, I know is in my blood because of my mom and my grandmother. So for sure, that has a huge impact on me.
I think for me, there's certain overlaps because my mother was also heavily into antiques. And so we learned kind of like from the underbelly of the folk art side of things, like a certain aesthetic. But then I was kind of an antagonistic punk rock skater kid. And so I was always looking for outside influences and, I looked to rock music, and I looked to street art, and I looked to things that other kids in Mount Vernon, Ohio weren't necessarily looking at, and I was trying to find who I was in outside sources because I didn't feel like I was really getting that from my family was, they say they were, we're all creative in some manner, right? But they really kind of lived the credo of like, you're the only creative in the family, like you're the black sheep. And I was like, okay, well, let's go with that then. And so.
It's interesting how you both sort of grew up with some of the same aesthetics in your home and, antiques and everything else, and then ended up, one of you kind of really feeding off of that, and the other of you maybe sort of feeding against it in some ways.
Yeah.
And I find that to be so true of creative practice in general, right? That all the stimuli that we get matter. It's just a matter of, are you absorbing it or kind of pushing against it, and sometimes both and in between, but yeah. So, Amy, let's come to you for a second. So you took a big risk leaving fabric design aside when your fabrics were in major retailers. You were developing a global celebrity status in the field, and I mean that seriously. I got a text message this morning from a friend who is in sort of nonprofit industry world, and she said, I just need to tell you that I'm so excited that Amy Butler is going to be there tonight, and I wish I could come, but I should pull up the text, but it's like, she's sort of the idol for all of us, like, sewing fangirls.
Oh my gosh, wow.
So can you talk a little bit about that decision, why the change, and how did that decision really set you up for where you are today?
Oh my gosh, that whole chapter of my life, our life together, David, so much of what we were doing as that part of my life was growing, we were doing it together also. But at the point where I decided to leave the industry, that had been the 18-year mark where I had been designing fabrics, and then probably midway in that chapter was when things really exploded with my designs in terms of there was a lot of appeal, a lot of relationships started with licensing, and that's kind of where the category just sort of expanded. It was like the Snowball Effect, where just sort of one connection led to the next connection. And the things that we brought into our lives at the time were all things that I was passionate about and cared about and wanted to take part in. It's like, you mean I get to design wallpaper? What, bedding? Like, these were all like things I fantasized about. And the reality was, at the point where I was leaving the industry, that part of the category really started to shift. So it took me about 2 years to make the final decision. But there was like a little pocket of time in between when all that big success was happening, and then the time that I was deciding to leave the industry. A lot of things were happening in my life personally also. So there was a peak right about 2010 where at one point we had 9 employees.
12.
Oh, 12 employees, thank you. We had expanded, and that was an aspect that we weren't really prepared for in a lot of ways. Like, we like to think that we're good people, that we understand how to manage things and so on and so forth. And we kind of kept that generating for quite a while. And then when the financial crisis sort of hit, we had to completely close that chunk of the studio. And so our operating, which has happened so many times in our career in all aspects of the design work that Dave and I have done, so we were rejigging and reshaping again. But what I'm trying to circle to is that the amount of stress that comes along with that and when everything kind of slowed down at that point, was like, wow, this is a really good window to realize that really didn't all make me happy. The things that I was creating made me happy, but I didn't have the skills to navigate all the personal things going on in my life and the level that the business had grown. So really amazing blessings in so many different ways. And at the point where I decided to leave the industry, it had changed shape quite a bit from the time that I started to the time that I was leaving. From a financial aspect, the saturation level of the fabrics in the quilting industry had grown to peak numbers, and our sales had shrunk quite a bit. At the same time, personally, I had lost my father. My mother's health had gone up and down quite a bit. And in that chapter, I became really interested in so many other aspects. As artists and creators, people, humans, we have all these dimensions. And I had a voice inside of me that was just like, I need to do these things. I need to follow these things that are drawing me forward. And one of them was we had, such a long story, but creating our cultural retreats had become a really big aspect of what we were doing. And through my friend who's here, Sheila, when my dad was ill, she was studying Ayurveda. And one of the practices that was part of her study was Reiki. And a lightning bolt hit me, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I feel like that's something that I could study and I could bring into my life for my dad, to help him. And ironically, Dad passed before I was certified, but I really feel like now Dad brought me Reiki. So there was that aspect. There was Blossom Magazine that we were so passionate about, and then our global retreats had really blossomed. And in the fabric industry, which is something I love so much, when you do something at that level, it's your whole self. It's your whole time, and it involves a lot of people and resources. And I think everybody can relate. You've got one foot in one world and another foot in the other world, and even though, like psychologically, if you look from the outside in, like, why would you ever leave doing something like that? In the end, it's your humanness and your heart and your happiness and your wholeness.
We had a conversation at one point that was like the most telling thing was I came in the studio and she was very like, there's so many things going on. There's so much going on in this business. There's so many things going on that we're managing. And it's like, well, do you want to be Martha Stewart or do you want to be an artist? Like what? Here's where we draw a line. And the big part of our relationship that's made our relationship successful as artists working together is every day you get up and you say, what do you want to do today to be happy? And that's it, period. Like we'll figure everything else out. We can live in a trailer, we can do whatever we need to do. No matter how successful you get, you have to have that mindset of abundance and the idea that we're artists, we get to be artists. We don't have to be artists, we get to be artists. And so that was like a big foundational thing that's run through our relationship that's kept us afloat. Like, what do you want to do today? What's going to make you happy? How do we go about figuring that out? And we do that for each other. So at that period it was like, well, we need to like simplify. We need to like get back to the roots of what we love to do. And like, if this is what you want to do now, we just got to figure it out.
Yeah, that's such a great ethos, I think, for, and lesson for all of us about life, but, particularly for our young students to really keep that in mind. I think particularly when you're in college for art and design, there are moments where it feels like, this is a lot of work, and is this really what I want to do all the time? And so reminding ourselves that no one's making you do this. I say sometimes, nobody's mom ever made them go to art school, right? I mean,
right.
As you are examples of, right? So this is your passion, and keep doing what you're passionate about. Speaking of passions, and Amy, mentioned that as creatives, we all have so many different passions and interests. And David, you are certainly no exception. Maybe the poster child for this. Not only again are you a designer, but you're a musician and an artist. And I'm curious for you, how do those different interests? How do you balance them? How do they feed each other? And maybe how do they also sort of feed you differently?
Yeah, I see all of it as completely interconnected, from the music to the design to the fine art to writing to even the athletic things that I love to do, like mountain biking and snowboarding and all of that. I see them as all completely interconnected because they've always been that way since I was a little kid. I want to go ride my skateboard, and I want to go draw, then I want to listen to rock music. So the idea is to never lose that imagination, to never lose that understanding that if I'm feeling right now like I just need to like go write something, I'm going to go write something. And then like, would you like to do some books? Like, yes, I'd love to do books. Like, let's sign a book deal. And so that grows into your adult life, that kind of wonder and curiosity. So I get bored if I'm just forced to focus on, oh, you're just going to do logos now. Like, I'm not. No. It's very much like no, I'm not going to just do logos. I'm going to go in my room and scribble. I'm going to. So it's just like an adult version of that kind of energy of just a massive curiosity about doing different things and never getting really great at any of them, but enjoying the process of doing all of the things.
Yeah, so we talked, when we were talking earlier, maybe it was even last summer, talking about the sort of snowballing. You used the word snowball, Amy. So, as you were just describing it, David, you have an opportunity, it leads to another, and so, how do you make sure that you're keeping your eyes open for those opportunities and taking advantage of them so you can really continue to build that snowball in that way?
I think it's really honoring what gets you excited and paying attention to things, because it takes a tremendous amount of energy doing all the things that we do. And I think if your compass, it's really simple, if your compass is focused on, wow, this really lights me up, or I can't imagine myself doing that. Or sometimes, at different times of our lives, it's important to, okay, I'm working here, I'm getting this life experience. This might not be the last job that I have, but I feel good here. I'm gaining things that are interesting to me. And you're balancing that with also at the same time paying attention to all of your passions that feed your next steps, which is what David was just describing. And what ends up happening when your focus and your filter is the things that you're passionate about, then you're going to gravitate and lead in more things that are like that in alignment with you. And I think it's important just to make sure and ask yourself, does this feel like me? Does this feel like something that I want to invest my heart into?
Certain things happened when we were coming up to get to the point where we've gotten, is starting out in graphic design, and Amy went to work for Hallmark, and then we left in 1992. We quit, and we just came back to Ohio to help take care of our families, and we just started completely from scratch. And we were doing fine art, we were doing commercial art, and Amy started you were painting surface designs on the kitchen table and sending them off to Surtex in New York, and that started, literally painting on the kitchen table at night. And we were just building a groundswell of energy around the stuff that we were doing, which led to us buying our first house and designing it, and other people looking at it and saying, hey, I know somebody at Country Living, they would love to come and photograph your house. That happens. Then you're like, okay, they loved our house. And then they're like, hey, we think you guys could do entertainment stories for Country Living. And we became editors for the magazine. That led to book publishing deals. And we went to Switzerland to go skiing, snowboarding, and we met a publisher in the bar who was like, oh, I work with Andrews McMeel, and we would love to have, I kind of know who you guys are through the magazine. And we ended up signing a 5-book deal on the spot. These things just happen because you're doing something that you love. You're not going out looking for it. Right. When we started, we would go after the magazines that we wanted to be in by going to Barnes & Noble, because we couldn't afford to buy the magazines. We would sit down and go through the magazines and write down the edit. We would write down stuff. We would build little portfolios and send them off to Chronicle Books and to Andrews McMeel and like Hearst magazines and all that stuff. And shit, after a while, people were like, these people are nuts. First of all, they're calling their business Art of the Midwest, which is super kind of hilariously apple pie arrogance. It's like the people in New York, like, you're really calling your business Art of the Midwest? Like, that's so kind of strange. But that was our thing that we were doing at the time, and it's evolved and changed a million times since, and everything's led to the next, available opportunity. They're like, either like, yeah, that sounds really good, or like, I don't think we want to go down that road.
We would have been friends, I think, back in high school, because I have an older brother who's a graphic designer, and for a while we were going to start a design firm called Cornfield Design, because it was, play on our name, but it was also that kind of like Midwest, it was going to be good.
Amy was like president valedictorian. She was like super good grades, and were you two president of your class?
I had a huge crush on him, but he would not have been attracted to me.
She was like, I would have loved you in high school, and I would have hated you in high school.
Well, okay, yeah, to be fair, I also was probably a little too nerdy for you in high school to be friends with, but still, Amy and I would have hung out. So. So let's talk a little bit more about collaboration. Again, you've already been talking about it, but tell us how you started collaborating, and what does that look like now? I mean, are all projects, do you think of them as collaborative projects? Do you kind of do your own thing, come back together? How does that work?
Yeah, well, I think when we first started out, when we were we dated for 4 years. We met at CCAD, and we dated up until, we met in 86. We got married in 90. And then we both kind of had jobs for a couple of years. And then when we left our jobs and we started, when we moved back to Ohio, we were kind of both at a place where we were like, well, what are we doing now? You know, I was picking up freelance work in Columbus, and Amy was painting the surface designs, and then we would have these fine art exhibitions, and we had a couple of fine art exhibitions just regionally, like at Kenyon College, and in Mount Vernon at the Simple Upham House.
Started out doing the craft show at Kenyon College, had a holiday craft show.
Yeah,
So we moved back to Ohio in October. That December, we had a little Art of the Midwest hut we built out of a scrap barnwood. We had to rent a farmhouse.
Like an old chicken, literally like an old chicken coop that we like turned into
And I always love fabric and sewing and stitching, so I made these three-dimensional angel ornaments, and he was making found object sculpture, and we had like this little booth, and we had jewelry, and like we had our wares, and then we were invited to have an art exhibition at the Olin Gallery at Kenyon College. And so just setting up, first of all, deciding we need to go back to Ohio and be with our families. We spent all our vacation time driving back from Kansas City. It's like, let's be with our people. And that was our first collaboration. And then at home, we're in this farmhouse. We had to really downsize our lives. Dave was driving into Columbus for the freelance. I walked down the road about 5 miles to bag apples at the apple orchard in between, so make like grocery money, so in between painting.
She left Hallmark Cards where she had like a corporate gig, and we moved we moved out in the country, and the only job that she could walk to, because we only had one car, was bagging apples.
Yep.
So she's like painting surface design during the day, you know, like at night, and then like walking to bag apples during the day.
Stitching and working on the
working
artwork
on
for
fine
the
art.
show.
And then I kind of noticed, like with her fine art, the way she was doing renderings and stuff was this great folk vernacular. And I was like, you know, I have clients like in the design world that would love this as an illustration style. Well, the next thing you know, I kind of got her involved in doing illustration work for different clients.
He wrote me in, that's the truth.
I roped her in. She wasn't confident
heels.
at all doing it.
Yeah.
And then like within 2 years, we had a rep in Minneapolis, and she was doing Starbucks and Levi Strauss, and she, like all of a sudden she was like in all the magazines, you know, Communication Arts and Print and all that stuff, and she was becoming like the Rolling Stones calling your portfolio up, and that kind of level like went very, very quickly. And at about the same time, I started doing the collage illustration work, and that's how I got the Cirque du Soleil work. So about the same time, we were kind of we were coming up in the illustration world. About the same time, the illustration world was starting to like, because the internet was coming on, and people were just buying stock art, you know, they were buying stock illustrations and stuff. So things were leveling off. And that's really when she started the sewing pattern business, was at the same time. So we were constantly ebbing and flowing from publishing into product, into illustration and graphic design, and everything was, you know, kind of keeping us on a reasonably steady growth rate.
Yeah, we would have our own individual projects, you know, the surface design and my stuff going on here, and then he would have the graphic design and the freelance work, and then we'd collaborate on the publishing, any of the opportunities where we were coming together,
yeah.
the books or the illustrations and things like that. And now currently we collaborate through Caravan Souk, which is a brand that we woke up during COVID, and we had created the brand a year before, inspired by our travels and our experiences in different cultures. And now we work together on Caravan Souk in terms of, I'm curating collections, but David's helping me we set up a photo studio in the house, we're taking photographs, we're getting things on the web store and things like that, and design and yeah.
So I want to ask a couple practical questions for everyone, but particularly for our students in the audience. So you are both very prolific, and I want to ask, do you have a routine? Or what does your sort of work week look like, typically?
Well, we kind of divide and conquer. And one of the things that I do, we both spend time personally taking care of ourselves doing something. So we brought a horse into our life 3 years ago. So I spend the first 2 hours of my day at the barn in the morning. And Dave's starting his routine with like studio stuff.
Getting up,
feeding cats, herding cats. So we kind of have a little bit of personal time in the morning.
Yeah.
Some kind of exercise somewhere in the day, but like my chunk of productivity is happening in the afternoon when I get back from the barn and into the evening sometimes. and then you're kind of in the same flow. Sometimes it just depends.
Yeah, it kind of depends. A lot of time, I can get a lot of stuff done when she's not around. So because there's fewer questions being asked. But
Less direction.
so I get a lot done in the morning actually, and then she comes home and is like, well, what have you been doing? Like, I've been working. Like, what do you? Like?
I think we've figured out how to work a lot smarter also. A really great book is Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week. We read that 10 years ago, and just the idea of kind of getting out of the cultural mindset of how a work day looks or how any day in a life could look, and how you can prioritize your time and focus your time in really effective ways and still have life balance. So I would say for me also, for both of us, for the last 15 years, that's been a huge focus for us, because the productivity comes from capacity and resources. So you can't give what you don't have. And we just discovered that through maturing and getting older and all kinds of things. But I think, the students I met today were just so full and just so in tune with themselves. And I think that carrying that richness forward in your life and honoring that is just such a huge, huge thing to do for yourself, because you're always going to need that relationship with yourself, number one, that's going to help you. So self-care and a routine and honoring your own personal time as a priority is what's going to feed the creative time and the resourcefulness.
So one more practical question here for our audience. I think that I want to talk about money for a minute. So I feel like artists and designers often shy away from the topic. They're either afraid to appear, that they are willing to kind of sell their creativity, or they don't want to appear that they want or need money. But I think it's a really critical topic, especially again for students, to really understand how do you make a living as a creative. And so, given the fact that you both again have such diverse careers and interests, what does making a living look like for you both?
In terms of now, or just like the big picture,
Big
all the way
picture,
along?
Yeah. Then, now, however you want to answer.
And that is definitely an ebb and flow for sure, because we have gone through phases like this, and that is the only thing that's consistent. It's never like this, it's never like this, it's never like this. And that also makes it interesting, and that also creates creative opportunities for reinvention or for reimagining something or looking at something from a different perspective. So financial success is, we found that it's always worked out. We're sort of have a bigger picture of like a holistic being as a human being in a universe, and making effort and focusing on things that we value, putting energy, what we try to do our best to put energy in the right places comes back to us. And money is currency. So, abundance takes lots of different forms. And so, there were times when David has had such massive retail programs, which are hugely productive financially. And when I was at the peak of designing and licensing and all of that, and our sewing pattern business was a massive business, and that was something we created ourselves along with fabric sales. That was another huge chapter of very large income. And I think that is just a reflection of the output of energy. It's not that the amount of energy is you're going to get that in return. I guess I'm trying to say there is, first of all, we need to make a living. Money as currency is an energy, and it flows in the patterns of your life. So I don't know if I answered that for you correctly, but it's just such a personal thing for everybody to think about. But I think to shy away from making a living in whatever aspect, and it's not always in the way that you imagine, and that's definitely the case. So, like I said earlier, there are times when I'm bagging apples and I'm working on the next thing that I'm interested in. And then the next thing I'm interested in ends up becoming the thing that I do. And I remember the precipice before I started designing fabrics. I was doing illustration full time. And that was a nice living. I had steady income. We bought our second home in Mount Vernon, and our quality of life was wonderful. And I think quality of life is the number one barometer to measure, the measuring stick to, financial success, happiness with finances.
Yeah, we went from, when you're young, you're like, I really want to make a life. And then you get to a point where you're like, I really need to make a living. And then you get to a point where you're like, I really want to make a life. And then you get to a point where you're like, I still need to make a living. And then you go to a place where you're like, I really need to make a life. And that's the same energy that goes into the ebb and flow of like what's coming in and what's going out. And the idea of currency is energy, that money is just currency. It's meant to flow through you. It's not a thing, it's an idea. So it's really hard to wrap your head around that when in our society, and especially for young art students, to think like, I got to make I have to bring in income. And you do, but that can come in different forms that don't have anything to do with how you're going to make your life. And if you're waiting tables and you're making art, just don't stop making the art. Like do the things that are going to. You're just casting seeds when you're young. You're putting seeds out. You're not going to overnight it. You have to be passionate and present in the idea that you're doing the right things. That you're,
open-minded and resourceful. And don't limit yourself to an idea of how you think you're going to make money. And then you're going to open yourself up. Your vision is going to expand, and you're going to notice other opportunities. And it's sort of like, I'm working on this thing here, but I'm also working on this thing here. And pretty soon, now you're doing this thing here. And if you had just stayed in a compartmentalized idea of how you will thrive and make a living, then you would completely miss everything else. So it's important, again, going back to that feeding yourself and honoring and paying attention to the other passions and things that excite you, that feed you, that all interrelate. I mean, one of my favorite jobs is, I started out at Hallmark. I interviewed here at CCAD, and it was between a job in New York City working for Tahari, but living in an apartment with 6 other women, and they were going to pay me a salary of like $10,000 for like a year or something. Back then, that wasn't even enough money to pay my bills. Not that money was like my main thing. I wanted to do fashion as well, but I'm like, I don't think I can live like that. So I went to Hallmark, and I had this great interview experience, a really creative atmosphere. I was going to be in a creative department, but it was in a marketing department. And if I had said no to that job, I wouldn't have understood about business. So I was a creative product developer, creating a creative plan for a marketing plan. And I had to deliver that to the artists on the boards that were making the gift wrap and all the other decorative things. But then I tried to move out of that division. I wanted to do other things. On the side, I redid my fashion portfolio. At night, in the weekends, I'd work on my fashion portfolio. Had a little side gig called Flatwoodland Bags. I was taking vintage fabrics and making bags and jewelry. And I sent my portfolio to Christian Lacroix, and he sent me a beautiful rejection letter. But just the exercise of doing that, and you're building confidence in yourself, and you're honoring the aspects of you that are you all the time. And so I had to leave Hallmark. I was having anxiety attacks. I was overworking. I wasn't doing what was making me happy. I was not happy. I was getting paid really well, and we had a nice quality of life, but that wasn't a quality of life if I was fighting the anxiety. That's a perfect example. I was so happy when I left that job, and I took a job as a receptionist in the design studio where Dave worked. And that's where I answered the phone. I learned about accounts payable and receivables. And so when we moved back to Ohio, I knew how to take care of our own invoicing. I knew how to pay bills. I knew how to deal with clients. So
you got paid to go to school, basically. How to run our business.
I think keeping your eyes open to all these possibilities and honoring what you love creates all kinds of unique opportunities, and not having an attachment to what you did or what your dad did or what someone in your class is doing right now or what you think the future looks like and fearing what it looks like. If you can stay present and mindful and whatever that you need to do that, that's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
So one last question for me, and then we're going to turn it over to the audience for questions. So keep that in mind, get ready. But coming back to CCAD for a moment, what experiences do you find yourself reflecting on from CCAD decades later?
Oh my gosh. always think about design. I'm always thinking about, I mean, I know you guys can relate to students or alumni that are here tonight. The well-rounded education that we got here, just understanding good design has affected everything that I do, and I think about it all the time. We were in Joseph Kazani's last color class before he retired. He was a longtime president here, and he was a color master. And
You don't know nothing.
he was a really strong-willed, opinionated Italian gentleman.
And think you know, you don't
That's what he sounded like. And he's really kind, but really honest and really kind. But he had a huge effect on that. But also the culture of CCAD and the sense of community. And I think, and I felt that really strong here again today, and it gave me goosebumps, because finding your people and finding people around you that support you, and the school's energy was like that back then, and it is right now. And it's just the kind of culture that exists here that's very special. And the pods of your classmates and how you share and you help each other and support each other. And that's been a huge barometer for us in terms of making sure that we're surrounded by really good people that love and support us and inspire us.
I think the thing that I got out of CCAD when I came here that was one of the most captivating, one of the most motivating things was that you saw kids come from all over different cultures, from all over the United States, all over the world, and when they finally arrive at art school, they get to be exactly who the hell they were supposed to be. Yeah. You know, like so many of my gay friends didn't come out in high school. They would come, they came to CCAD, and all of a sudden, they get to be who the hell they're supposed to be. You know, and that to me was super profoundly motivating. You know, like just to be like, oh, I don't have to. And I was white kid growing up in Mount Vernon and rode a skateboard. Like it was no big deal for me. But for a lot of people, it was a massively big deal. And to be able to be in a community where it was kind of like an artistic utopia at the time, to be able to just be an artist and not think about what other people are going to think about you. And maybe they had to go home and deal with their parents at the time, and maybe that was traumatic for them or hard for them. But here, it was like a perfect place.
Yeah, that's nice. I like to think that there's still a lot of that here, for sure.
Yeah. I hope so.
Yeah. So Chris Mundell, Vice President for Institutional Engagement, is standing there, and he's got a mic. If you have a question, would you raise your hand so Chris could come to you with a mic? I know that we might be able to hear you, but we're also recording, and so I want to make sure the recording can hear you. All right.
I promised my wife I'd have a question. So thanks for coming out tonight. Really appreciate it. So I have tons of questions, but I'll start off with this one. No one's laughing. Okay. With the success, right, as you move through your careers, right, not saying that you're getting older, but as you move through your careers, can you talk about your legacy, right? And have you thought about the legacy and the impact that you've had in the industry? And what does that look like for you, right? Where you're going and where you want to be in the future, right? And how you're impacting other people.
Wow.
I have definitely never thought about that. I can't believe people are paying attention to anything that I'm doing ever. So it's really an interesting question, because I am so busy still hustling that I don't really even think about things that I've done that much in the past until I'm asked the questions put towards me. I still feel like every day, I still feel like a kid doing this. I still feel very young and very energetic about what I'm doing, and I don't really, I look back, we got out our portfolio of this crazy stuff that we had been doing for the last 40 years, and I look at it and just like, that was like yesterday. I can't believe. But she has more like of a, you actually have a legacy. I mean.
That's true. Right now what I think about a lot is, and what David said when we brought all of our artwork out, and this, we just had forgotten about we had done so much that we've forgotten about some of the details. And just this chapter of my life, I guess the legacy that there's a thread of who I am and I believe who we are that has been, when you look at everything we've created or the space that we created from, we have just intuitively wanted to give something to people, whether it's the quality of what we're doing and the amount of energy we put in something, the time that we spend with people, the type or the voice that's behind our artwork and what it means to us and how we want to inspire other people and share with other people. And I've grown and learned, and I have so much growing and learning to do, but the idea that generosity and compassion for myself and for other people, and to cultivate a culture and the energy of it, whatever I'm doing and what I'm putting in the world. And I think that's been a thread of what we've done, and I think now at this stage of my life, it feels even more important to recycle that or recirculate it within myself, because I think what I'm learning about who I am now is a lot of my identity and my understanding of myself has been all that I've been doing outside of myself. And you know, life brings you curveballs and loss and tragedy and amazing blessings and all the incredible levels of emotion and life experience. And I feel like I have done a lot of personal healing where I can really appreciate the naive energy and love in what I have always tried to create and give people. And now I have a really beautiful opportunity to express that at a new level that is kind of emerging. And I hope to leave that behind with whoever I cross paths with, you know, in whatever way. Does that answer your question?
Oh, people come up to me. I've had women come up to me on the street, like introduced, and they're like, "You're Amy Butler's husband?" and they start crying. They literally start crying. They're like, "I can't tell you what," and I tell Amy that. She's like, "What did I do? What did you do?"
I thought you were going to tell women to come up and compliment his feet all the time. I thought that's what he was going to tell.
That's a whole different subject.
Story.
I have pretty amazing feet.
We'll leave that for CCAD after dark. We got another question here. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but this isn't a question at all. But it's still relevant, I promise. Yeah. So my baby blanket was one of the fabrics you designed, and my mom.
What?
My mom loves your. Oops. Is anything broken?
Nope.
And I'm here at CCAD, and I was very, very drawn to CCAD, and your fabric is all over my house, and I've
that's
like
beautiful.
So I've grown up with your artwork without even realizing it, and I think I
wow.
have something to thank to you for me being so drawn to CCAD.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with me. That's amazing.
That's the legacy triangle right there. So
That's amazing. Thank you. Wow.
That's really great. That's beautiful. What else? Other questions out there? We got one here and then there.
Speaking of generosity, my name's Mary, and Amy and Dave, I met you through Kevin 100 years ago. And you were talking about generosity and talking about being naive. I was very naive. I didn't know of you. And you said, "Oh, I do some illustrations and a little bit of this and that." I said, "Oh, would you teach me how to sew?" And then I think you had maybe 6 people working for you, but I was like, "Oh." And you said, "Well, yeah, sure." And I said, "Well, do you think I could have some of your stuff?" And you said, "Well, yeah, I'll do that." And the next week, you sent a bag, and it arrived at my house. And a few weeks later, I was at Heathrow with that bag. And like you said, they were like, "Is that an Amy Butler bag?" And I said, "Yes." And I know her personally. She's going to teach me how to sew.
That's amazing.
But anyway, you both are very generous people. It shows through your work and just the aura and the spirit that comes through your talks and your art. So I was really glad to see you on the road speaking, so that we could come see you tonight. So it's good to see you.
Oh, it's good to see you. Thank you. Wow.
All right, Chris is going to make his way over to the other side here.
Thank you both for being here tonight. I appreciate it. I'm a freshman graphic design student, and I was wondering what advice you had on emerging and being successful in that field.
So I think one of the main things I can tell you about graphic design and pretty much anything at CCAD is being an artist is one part creativity and maybe one part talent. But creativity is the expression of imagination. And talent is the byproduct of persistence. You need both, but imagination leading to creativity is much more important than your idea of comparison of talent. Because we get so caught up in the idea of competition and like, that's a much better artist. Every kid that comes here is probably the best artist from their high school, and they come to this school. And I went to Mount Vernon, and we had a crap program in Mount Vernon. So I came here, and there was, as far as actual talent, like ability to do things, I was outclassed by a long shot. But imagination there's no comparison in creativity and imagination. So you have to live in that world first, and then apply your persistence and apply your ideology about how you want to work second. Just recognize that graphic design is about narration. It's about storytelling. It's not about doing a pretty logo. It's about telling a story. So every time you approach something for a client or for yourself or whatever, think of it as the very first thing that somebody's going to see is this, and it's going to either make you or break you. So you're never going to be able to remove yourself from the process, so imagine you're the person looking at the thing that you're creating in the end, that you're the person that this logo is being created for, and then strip away all of the ego that you have about it and just have fun with it. That's probably the best thing I can tell you, because I don't really have any great graphic design tips. Because it's really, every graphic designer is different. I love to work in things that are more organic and feel more hand done, but I admire more like the Bauhaus or like the WPA. I appreciate all levels of it, but find your niche and find the kind of thing that you're really good at and go after what you love, and the people will find you because your work will come through, your personality will come through the work. Yeah.
We got time for one more question. Oh, there we go. Perfect.
I hired Dave almost 40 years ago.
Oh, God.
He was an intern at Columbus Monthly Magazine.
Yeah.
And I want to tell you, you talk about imagination. He did the most heinous work that I could find him to do. And he was so good at it, and he worked so hard. And he was funny and self-deprecating, and just like you are today, by the way. And I really appreciated you, and I enjoyed working with you. And gosh, look where you came.
I know.
Look about you.
If it wasn't
now.
for you, I don't know where I'd be. I'd
There you go.
probably still be at Wendy's.
There you go.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, so yes, so have fun and imagine all the things you can, and then work like hell, because that's what he did.
That's great. That's great. I think work like hell, and I think the last thing I'll just pick up on of what you said was, telling your story. And I think we were having a conversation earlier about storytelling and how important that is. That again, you are, there are so many students with great imagination and great talent and good perseverance here at CCAD, but the ones who are going to really sort of move out of the pack and get known are those who can tell their story in compelling ways and through their work, but also in other ways, right? Whether that's verbal communication or written communication, whatever that is. But you both have done such a great job of telling your story and telling a really compelling story about how you can have this incredibly diverse and fulfilling creative career. I find you both so inspiring just to think about starting each day with what are you going to do, that's going to bring you joy, and how all of us can really embrace that. Thank you so much again for being here. I really appreciate it. I had such fun talking with you all. Thank you all for being here as well. And again, come back to CCAD often. Thanks.